Hi, everybody. Welcome to Mile High Sports Today. I'm Sean Drotar, your host. Cody Roark with me today on Tuesdays, as he normally is, to break down the Broncos. Cody, our lead writer for Mile High Sports, covering the Broncos and the host of the Locked On Broncos podcast, as well as all the film rooms that you can find on the Mile High Sports YouTube channel as well. The Broncos finish a bye week, Cody, and right off the bat, let's just get to it. The playoff path for the Broncos now becomes quite a bit more clear. They did not get a ton of help when you're talking about a lot of the games this weekend. The Dolphins and the Jets went to overtime. Had the Jets won that would have helped the Broncos more than any other game. That did not happen. The Jets found a way to keep doing what it is they do, which is lose.
Loser franchise.
Remarkable fashion. They lose in overtime to the Dolphins. The Rams beat the Bills. That is interesting because it gives now the Chiefs a 2-game lead, even though the Bills have a tiebreaker. The Chiefs now have a 2-game lead with a handful of games to go. So it increases the possibility that the final game of the year, the Chiefs might rest some players against the Broncos.
I don't even think that'll happen, though.
I don't think
the way, because think about
either.
it. If they do that, essentially they'd have 2 weeks off before they play. And the way that they've been playing this year, I don't know if Andy Reid's going to be like, hey, like, all right, we got the 1 seed locked up. Let's, I feel like, because even just talking to players, like Broncos players before the bye week, they didn't want the bye week to come up because they're like, hey, we're in a rhythm right now. It'll be nice to have a week off and let the body rest. But it's like when you don't play a game after you're so accustomed, and for them to play 13 straight weeks without a break, now it's like, oh, it's kind of like an illusion. So this is going to be, I think, a little bit of a test here for this team.
It'll be interesting. The Chiefs knock off the Chargers, obviously, with the another last second drive by the.
What was your
Chiefs.
Thoughts on that?
They bounce it in.
What were you doing when that happened? I was brushing my teeth, getting ready to go to bed. We just went to we went to Red Rocks for the Christmas and color thing. Which
nice.
By the way, you have a girlfriend, you have someone that you love, whatever it may be, wife, whatever, kids, take them to that. $44 tickets. Literally, Christmas, you go through, you turn into a little dial station there, and it syncs the music perfectly with the lights. It's incredible. We got back from that. Even though it was the bye week, my fiance told me, she's like, well, the Broncos don't play today, so that means no football. Like, let's just. I was like, you got
to pick your battles.
I had to compromise.
You got to pick your battles.
She let me watch. She let me watch a little bit. She whooped my ass at a Fast 45 workout. So, she gave me that as kind of like, all right, hey, here's your mulligan. But coming back, I'm sitting there brushing my teeth, and I'm just like, all right, here the Chiefs are lining up for game-winning field goal
with their third kicker of the year.
And I was like, okay, this is gonna be easy. I see the direction in which once he kicks it, I'm like, whoa, is he gonna miss this? And all of a sudden you hear doing. I'm like, oh, they might have missed it. And then it goes in, and you see them celebrating like, of course. Things
are just going their way. The Chiefs knock off the Chargers. That's the one that had the biggest good news for the Broncos, because it reels the Chargers in a little bit. Obviously, Broncos and Chargers now with matching records. The Chargers have the tiebreak because they won the beginning game. The Bengals end up winning over the Cowboys last night as Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase again just put up stupid numbers in a combination for a team that is having an absolutely disastrous year. But the Bengals obviously on the schedule, that win keeps them alive. For the Broncos, it makes it pretty straightforward. They're really two direct paths to the playoffs at this point, and they're pretty easy. Number one, win 3 of your final 4 games. That's the simplest way. You win 3 of your final 4, you're in. Now that's the Colts, the Chargers, the Bengals, and the Chiefs. It's easier said than done, but the Broncos do control their own destiny in that regard. The other way to do it is beat the Colts on Sunday. That's the straightforward one. And then you win any of the other remaining 3 games, and any Miami loss would eliminate them, which is too bad the Jets couldn't get it done. That would have left it really easy for the Broncos. They just need to win Sunday and any other. Yeah. But it's okay because here they are in the second year with Sean Payton, rookie quarterback Bo Nix, and here are the Broncos in control of their playoff destiny. Not a lot of people saw this as a possibility. But you did.
I did. Yeah. Am I surprised it's happened the way that it maybe has? Yeah, a little bit.
I mean, the AFC has fallen in some bizarre fashions. The Bengals, the Steelers rising the way they have.
Didn't expect that, especially like with the Bengals. I think the Bengals probably the biggest shock, because when you look at that, when we looked at the second half of the schedule, like, wow, that's a brutal second half schedule for them. I'm not surprised, but I'm surprised in which how things have transpired in the AFC a little bit. We've done a roundtable series over at milehighsports.com, and I think we all kind of agreed the biggest surprise of the season was how Bo Nix has emerged a little bit. I'm not surprised he's emerged, but I'm surprised at how he's emerged so fast, right? We're seeing him steady grow. We haven't seen really any regression, backwards decline, anything like that. So that's been nice to see. And look, I think there's a possibility that could come hopefully it's not in these final 4 games. I think you want to be able to continue to stack and build things here. And obviously we'll dive into today some of the keys in which Denver can accomplish that. But I would say really for this Broncos team, if you want to be a playoff team, these final 4 games, it is your perfect stage to prove that you belong. In my opinion, it's like, all right, you don't want to have to rely on other people to get you into the dance, right? I always think anytime you get into the dance, all right, you get a ticket to the dance, anything can happen, but you don't want to try to get a ticket just because somebody else couldn't go, in a sense. Like you want to be able to say, like, I earned my right to get in there. I think that's where the mindset is of obviously the Broncos players. I know the bye week for a lot of them, they're like, it was tough. Guys like Jaleel McLaughlin, who were just absolute workhorses that wanted to just continue to keep grinding. He said it was tough. I didn't know what to do. So a lot of guys stayed here in Denver. Some guys got away, which is good. Like, and I don't fault anybody for that. Nothing's going to change with like, oh, I'm just going to stay here all week and do nothing. It's like, no, like take a little bit of a reset because, hey, now this is the grind. That these 4 games are so crucial for the rest of the season. And Denver's ahead of schedule, I think, from where they're at. So you want to be in the playoffs. This is your shot. Prove it.
You have to get your body right, too, obviously, in the bye week. And there are big games this week. Obviously, the main one, the Broncos and the Colts, they take care of business there. They put themselves in really good shape. Chiefs play in Cleveland this week. Who knows? The Jameis Winston wildcard energy, they've knocked off a couple teams earlier this year. Maybe it happens again. Bengals and the Titans, you'd have to like the Bengals there, but who knows when you're looking at those comparison points. And then maybe, even though it doesn't directly impact the Broncos, potential Super Bowl preview with the Bills at the Lions. I mean, the game of the weekend, besides for folks that aren't Broncos fans, but for the Bills to somehow lose that one, that makes things interesting as well. And then the Chargers will host the Bucks, another team that behind Baker Mayfield does not stop fighting until the clock hits 0. Yeah. So a lot of things could happen for the Broncos that could be beneficial, but the main thing they have to worry about is beating the Colts. And
win.
Let me look at the first part of it. Okay. Anthony Richardson is not, I want to make this very clear in case you didn't understand this, and obviously I'm thinking most football fans do. Anthony Richardson is not Lamar Jackson, but Anthony Richardson is a very, very skilled quarterback that can run and that can cause a lot of havoc on the offensive side of the ball. The only real comparison we saw in that is the Broncos-Ravens game. Now, obviously, the Colts aren't the Ravens, but when you look at the idea of a mobile quarterback that the Broncos kind of had difficulty figuring out what they wanted to do with Lamar Jackson, what are the main things you're thinking about with Richardson that you can do that you can't do with Lamar? And is there anything that you can't do that you learned with Lamar?
Well, I would say like their levels of mobility are definitely different. Like I look at
one's power more than speed.
Yeah, Anthony Richardson, he's big bodied, goal line, short yard situations. They're going to roll with him. They're going to do design. They're going to do QB power. They're going to do a lot of different things just to get him the ball in short yardage situations because he is a big body. He's going to fall forward. And look, the other thing too, he's not that accurate of a passer when it comes to certain areas of the field, right? But he is the type of guy, and the Colts have been that team this year where they're going to launch some deep shots downfield, and they certainly do connect on those. They got talented receivers. We'll see if Josh Downs plays this week for them. I know he's been a big kind of riser for them. You still have Michael Pittman Jr., who's obviously a very talented player. Mm-hmm. Alec Pierce is a very talented player. I think at tight end, they got Mo Alley Cox still, Jonathan Taylor at tailback. You have those guys. It's not going to be an easy game here for Denver. This is, for the Colts, they're treating it like a playoff game. The Broncos are treating it like a playoff game. Win in advance, essentially, is the mindset here. But, man, Anthony Richardson, I think a lot of people are going to look at, like, well, his completion percentage is, 46%?
Yeah, 47
on the season. That's because he doesn't really have success in the short to intermediate passing game on a consistent basis. But I tell you what, all he needs to do, and certainly for the Broncos, coming off a game on Monday Night Football where, hey, they stopped the run, but they gave up over 400-plus yards through the air, and it is a product like Jameis Winston took some deep shots downfield. Mm-hmm. The Broncos can't fall into that trap this week, or else it's going to be it's going to be a little bit of a challenge.
Yeah, the Broncos really aren't built for a shootout, even though they managed to get one done against Cleveland. At this point, they're just not built for it. They don't have the kind of playmakers that you can consistently do that. And that will lead us back to Bo Nix. And we'll talk a little bit about Bo Nix and what he needs to do to take the next steps in just a moment. But I want to remind you that if you're looking for the perfect place to work, play, exercise, and socialize, especially now that we're getting into the holiday season, might be some gifts, or you might be thinking about losing a couple pounds after that holiday season. You can look no further further than the Denver Athletic Club, right in the heart of downtown Denver. And as a DAC member, you'll enjoy those top-notch amenities. Yeah, you can lose the weight with a full fitness center. You get that as well. But spa, massage, Pilates, golf simulator, a lot of different ways to get in shape, to have fun. And by the way, if you need to, they have a licensed childcare center there as well. So bring the kids if you need to go ahead and get your workout in, or take a couple swings on those digital links and maybe take a break from the kiddos as well. But what truly sets the DAC apart, what's kept it in the heart of Denver's community for over a century, is that vibrant community. The member-owned club is all about you, offering year-round social events, co-working, dining, fun for the entire family. The DAC is truly a club for your whole life. So look at joining the Denver Athletic Club today. Visit denverathleticClub.cc for all the details. Cody, we talk about Bo Nix and what he needs to do to take the next steps. And it's kind of funny, but we talk about next steps for Nix, because especially over the last couple months, really, the number of awards he's won week in and week out, seemingly, and he's really been in most metrics, whether it's completion percentage, touchdown interception ratio, you name it. He's basically been in the top 10 quarterbacks in the league in performance over the last month or so. But there are things that he can do to get better. My main concern is the interceptions. Now, in his first 2 games, he had 4 interceptions, obviously. I think you expect that for a rookie. Yeah. Between weeks 3 and 9, he had 2 more, but he had 2 more against the Browns, and a couple of those a little bit careless. Now, granted, what we talked about, the Broncos aren't built for a shootout. Yeah. And maybe that's not what you want to put Bo Nix in. But the other thing that's intriguing is coming into the bye week, and obviously things changed with the Broncos not playing. Bo Nix had the 3rd most dropbacks of any quarterback in the league, behind only C.J. Stroud and Geno Smith. That's not really probably the way Sean Payton had drawn it up for Nix.
It's because they don't have a run game. That's the reason why. You know, you take more shots, you drop them back down because you have no effective run game that's consistent, you know, inside the 50-yard line. You know, you can't even, like Denver against Cleveland, couldn't even pick up a 2nd and 2. They couldn't pick up a 2nd and 1. They couldn't pick up a 3rd and 1. They went backwards, or they got stuffed there. And that's a little problematic there. Like, there's times where the Broncos, it's 3rd and 1, they're throwing the football because they can't run the football well. And to me, I was a little peeved the other day when we got on the Zoom call. Nobody asked about the run game. Like, hey, Sean, like, what do you think the biggest key is here in these final 4 weeks to get the run game going? Instead, we get questions, what was your message to the team? This, that, and the other. Like, it's all just filler and fluff. Like, the more I learn about this media game, the more I realize is that a lot of things are kind of given on a little bit of a silver platter in a sense. Like, you know, we talk about asking the tough questions. It's not about asking the tough questions. It's about asking the valid questions. Like, what is the problem with the run game? Why aren't you guys having success with it? No one wants to ask that. I'm going to ask it tomorrow.
Yeah.
You know, during the open period where you get a chance to actually jump in and get it yourself.
And you may or may not get an answer to that.
I mean, well, the one thing I'll say too is, like, there are, like, fans, I get a lot of people that ask, like, how come you guys don't ask Sean this? Like, there are certain things we know Sean will not answer.
Right.
If it has to do with injuries, like the status of a player, he's not going to answer. If it has to do with scheme, he's not going to get it.
Right.
Why would any coach do that? Those are the things that people want to know, but those are things that coaches are never going to tell you, which 100% they shouldn't.
Which is where we come in, because like we start looking at how these things go. We use experience, and we try to analyze, and we try to help you figure out what
part of me wonders
why it's been there.
Part of me wonders with the run game, and this is the thought that I had during the bye week, is, okay, you have a chance now, like when you're playing 13 straight weeks and you're trying to get a large sample size, and it's like, all right, hey, early on, the indication is that the run game with Javonte Williams isn't consistent. You get that, like, through the first 7 to 8 weeks, you're like, okay, we're seeing this. Is this going to be the season-long story? And so now it's like, all right, now we get to week 13. Still can't run the football effectively there. Well, what's the difference? Okay, what can we do now during the bye week? When you're going from Sunday into, like, now we're going into game planning for yet another opponent, you can't really change the rotation. You can't really change what you're going to do. I'm very curious if we're going to see Sean and the Broncos come out of the bye week here and maybe start to really roll with Audric Estime, who he has said so many times need to find a way to get more touches. Now that you had a week off and you can evaluate and game plan, can you make it to where Audric Estime is the primary ball carrier, he and Jaleel McLaughlin? And then, not saying like Javonte's not going to have a role at all. I think you put Javonte Williams in the role that Samaje Perine had last season. Not only can he be a reliable guy for you in pass protection, you know, he's got solid hands out of the backfield, though he's had several drops this year out of the backfield that have been a little problematic, but Javonte can still offer you something. I just don't think as the primary back, he's doing that right now. I think you got to change things up just to see, because what you have done so far is not working. And what do we say? Definition of insanity is doing the same exact thing over and over again and expecting a different result. Can the Broncos run game find a way to get going in these final 4 games? If that happens, If that happens, which the national people think that Broncos have a great run game, which you go to show people don't pay attention. If that happens, this team, I guarantee you, has a chance to win 11. They might run. They could run the table if they can get the run game going.
Oh,
it sounds spicy, and it might be a little spicy.
Yeah, it sounds spicy,
but I think it's absolutely possible.
Well,
Denver could win these next 4 games.
You see a scenario of Javonte Williams. The drop off has been significant. He did have 59 yards against the Falcons in that big win, but the other 3 games in the last 4, 1 yard against the Chiefs, 1 yard on 4 carries against the Browns, and negative 2 yards on 8 carries against the Raiders. So have kind of fallen off a cliff there. Good hands, obviously the best receiver in pass and the best running back in pass protection, but you have to figure something else out. And the idea the Broncos have a good running game, I have the numbers for you right there. The Broncos are averaging 112.2 a game. That's 20th in the league.
And that's not from a running back. That's
no.
Bo Nix is escaping pressure on one play.
Yep.
He's picking up 25, 30 yards. And
10 touchdowns for the Broncos running game is 23rd in the NFL. But take Nix into this. So if you actually go in just the raw yards, Nix has 304 rushing yards and 4 touchdowns. Granted, other teams have quarterback rushing yards as well.
Yeah.
But if you were to just remove the rushing yards of Bo Nix, the Broncos would be 30th in the league in rushing.
Good run game, though.
And 30th. And they'd be in the bottom 3 in touchdowns as well as Nix with the 4 is tied for the team lead. So it's not only a bad running game, but it's a bad running game that doesn't seem to have a clear through line to be effective. But is it at least comfortable to say? I know I've harped on it week in and week out with Troy Rank when he joins us on Mondays and Fridays. He and I have both been kind of pounding the table for Estime to take a larger lead, if for no other reason that the guy knows how to fall forward when he gets hit. And this 3-man running game and just going for the hot hand, it's not sustainable to my mind, because even though you have Jaleel McLaughlin perform very, very well against the Browns, it was almost entirely in the second half. Mm-hmm. And the problem is in the first half, you're just kind of trying things to see what works. For the Broncos, who don't have that explosive an offense yet, you can't burn a half to find out which of your running backs looks like you can be a little more productive in the second half.
Yeah, well, and that's
you've got to scheme it.
And I'll say that too. Like Sean Payton has been very honest. He said that for him, he said it was like the $6 million question about how do you get the running back rotation in a spot where you have an identity. And he said, we're still trying to figure that out, which, look, I understand it's when you're in, like I just said earlier, when you're in the midst of game planning on a week-to-week basis, you don't get that chance. But the bye week is the perfect opportunity to say, all right, this is the change we have to make, and this is how we're going to do it, and this is what it's going to look like. No matter what, we're going to get Estime 16 carries in the game. We're going to get Jaleel 10, whatever it may be. We're going to give Javonte 3 or 4 or 5 at that point. In terms of carries, I'm not talking about snaps and overall touches that can differentiate based on how many snaps you play in a game. Something's it's got to change. Like the fact that the Broncos offense, while it's not explosive as you talked about, it's got explosive capability if the other pieces are working.
Yes.
And that's been the problem, is that Bo Nix, you mentioned, 3rd in dropbacks right now in the NFL. When you look at how many times he's dropping back there, so much of the offense, like people are trying to make the argument that Bo Nix doesn't elevate the offense. Bo Nix is the offense right now.
I agree.
He's the reason the offense is having success. And look, Cortland Sutton's a big part of that, the success that he's having, especially on 3rd down. But we're going to get to some personnel things here in a little bit. But I think the key is like the connection between those two guys. I saw a graphic. It was like they have 42 connections between the two of them, I think, or in terms of like 3rd down, if I'm not mistaken, this year. This is where younger guys are going to have to step up at some point. And so I think that as things continue to kind of formulate as this season transpires in these final 4 games, you have to treat really these final 4 games as if you are in the playoffs. Essentially,
you talk about generating first downs.
Win, advance. Like Denver could lose a game and still somehow make it in, but their chances.
But you don't want to lose this one.
No, you don't. This
one to the Colts would be problematic.
And you don't have the tiebreaker right now to the Chargers, the Ravens. So those teams are already in the wild card right now, have the tiebreaker over you. You don't want to lose the tiebreaker to the teams that are directly behind you. It's problematic when you look at it on paper. It's a little. If you're the Broncos, it's like, hey, there's a lot of pressure on them this week, but I think they're ready. I think that this mentality, the team that I've seen this year, is so different than the team that we saw last year from a mentality standpoint, from a leadership standpoint. I think these guys are going to come out focused. But ultimately, there's going to be some questions as to what is it going to look like on Sunday? How are the Broncos going to game plan? Are they going to have certain guys back from injuries, so on and so forth? Like, there's so much we're going to still get into today. Yeah,
the generation of first downs you brought up with Cortland Sutton, right? Sutton has generated 44 first downs on catches, 44. Next 3 guys, Devon Vele, Little Jordan Humphrey, and Javonte Williams, have generated 39. And you'll notice that Humphrey and Williams aren't major cogs in the passing game. And that's your next three guys, and they still haven't matched Sutton. So even though with Vele with 19, it's not even half. So it's pretty clear if you're scheming against the Broncos, you know what you need to do. When you talk about the running game, if you're going to borrow from the best, right? So when Isaiah Pacheco was hurt for the Chiefs, they signed Kareem Hunt. Kareem Hunt came in and was having 20-plus carries a game with regularity, and not a high per carry average, but still getting the job done for them for the most part. Since Pacheco came back, Hunt, who had been carrying basically between 18 and 27 carries a game, in the last 2 games has 12 in total.
Yeah.
And maybe the idea, even though Hunt had been effective for them, he's got 600 yards on the year, 5 touchdowns. Those would be both best on the Broncos by a significant margin.
How crazy is that?
And they can pretty much
has a good run game.
Just set him down, right? And now they go back to Pacheco, even though they're kind of working their way back. Use Pirine in the 3rd down and just kind of mixing and matching Hunt in, who had been basically their bell cow guy for the majority of the season. Is there a point where if you're Sean Payton, you look at it and say, hey, you know what? We have been trying all season to make Javonte Williams work. It's not working. Moreover, he's a free agent after the year. We know we have Estime and McLaughlin under contract. Maybe there's just not enough time to keep all 3 of these mouths fed. And look, if the Chiefs are basically saying Kareem Hunt's been really good for us, but we're going to give him the ball 5 times a game at most now.
Yeah.
Why continue to do this with Javonte Williams?
Yeah, I mean, at this point, there is no point of doing that. You know, it's almost kind of like,
I know pass protection is valuable, but
yeah. And I would make an argument. I think Audric Estime and Julian McLaughlin have improved in pass protection the last handful of weeks, especially with the more reps that they've got.
There's a ceiling for McLaughlin given his size.
But Jaleel, though, he did a great job this past week against the Browns. He picked up a terrific blitz, you know, didn't get leveled, and he altered it and it allowed Bo Nix time to throw there. Like, you know, he's got the commitment to do it.
Yeah, you don't have to pancake guys. You have to commit to get in front of a guy. Just got to delay him for a little bit.
So for me, it's like, all right, like the Broncos, you can learn a lesson here, right? What did they try to do last year with Jerry Jeudy? They tried to do as much as they could to maybe get him some looks and some features, and they're like, it's just not working with us. And that may very well be the case here with Javonte. I love Javonte Williams. I think as a human being, I love him as a player. But I think when we look at where this team is at right now, it's not working for him specifically.
It's getting worse.
And I don't think that's an indictment on Javonte. I just think that sometimes you look at scheme, you look at fit. We look at this Broncos offense. Go back and watch the L22. Outside of when they do boot action stuff in terms of being able to open things up, what they'll do is they'll pull Quinn Miners or Ben Powers backside for extra protection because they're going to let a guy go on the backside. Aside from that, in the run game, you don't see a lot of pulling here from the offensive line. It's mainly zone blocking at this point. And that, I think, part of me wonders, like, if the Broncos had a power element to their game, could they get the run game going? I don't know. Like, is this an offensive line issue? Because we know the Broncos O-line, they're pretty solid in pass protection. So why can't they get the run game going? So for me, it's kind of a multifaceted problem where it could be personnel, but it also could be scheme relative to where a guy's fitting in, where he's not. And the Broncos, they're you can't say they haven't tried to get Javonte going. They have.
Yeah.
It just simply hasn't worked. And that's frustrating because Javonte's a great dude, great competitor, great guy inside the locker room. It's just like when you look at the business side of the NFL, it's like, is it working? No, it's not working right now.
Well, and the point you're making is really important because you're right. I still like Javonte Williams as a player. He's only 24 years old. You know, there's still, I think, upside. But you go back to the first year, the year in which he looked so explosive, right? His rookie year.
He's running through dudes.
Right. But look who you had. You had Garrett Bowles there, of course, as well. But the rest of the line was different. Dalton Reisner, more of a guy that they used a little bit more in motion. Lloyd Cushenberry, obviously a guy that wasn't really a stocky power guy. Quinn Miners was a rookie, and Bobby Massey on the right tackle is part of the revolving door they'd had there. But you're right. But now you're looking at a Broncos offensive line that is designed a little bit more for pass protection. Bo Nix actually, when you're talking about pressures, is among the lowest pressured quarterbacks in the league. And perhaps this particular alignment for the offensive line is a good fit for Bo Nix, but not a good fit for Javonte Williams. Yeah. And I think that's important. It's not necessarily that Javonte Williams just forgot how to play football. No. That's not the case. But the scheme that he was in which he's had success is not the running scheme he's in now. And so sometimes it really is fit. The dirty secret in the NFL about draft picks, about everybody, it's about fit. Bo Nix is going to be in the mix for rookie of the year. If he had been picked by 10 other teams in this league, we might already be talking about him as a bust. Fit is how the NFL really functions. And so the fact that we're looking at this, Javonte Williams, I think you are on to something there in the idea that it's just basically for the Broncos as they're comprised now. In Sean Payton's second year, where he's reinvented this team the way he wanted it, and Javonte Williams was here before Sean Payton got here, that maybe Javonte Williams just isn't a fit for the Sean Payton offense. It's not necessarily that one's bad.
Yeah.
We see Russell Wilson having outstanding success with Pittsburgh. It's not that Russell Wilson forgot how to play football. I tried to tell everybody this last year. Fit. It's the fit. And so I think what you're onto with Javonte Williams is part of it. And maybe in Sean Payton's case, maybe it's time to just pull the Band-Aid off and say, you know what I had planned for, this isn't it. But the two guys that I added in the last 2 years, Estime and McLaughlin, they are.
Yeah, and look, I think kind of similar to your point of what you had mentioned between like Isaiah Pacheco, Kareem Hunt, and even Samaje Perine. Looking at it from a balance standpoint of that is like, all right, your primary bell cow guy should be Audric Estime, and then your other guy that should come in should be Jaleel McLaughlin. And then, look, there's still a role for Javonte. It's just not going to be as big as the one
Samaje Perine had
right
2
now.
touches in the game for the Chiefs over the Chargers. 2, 1 carry, 1 dump-off pass, and in there to pass block, and maybe that's the role for Javonte Williams, but they keep trying to get the square peg into the round hole. It's not working. So
yeah. And part of me is also wondering too, is like, Denver comes out in a lot of 12 personnel. They'll do a lot of Nate Adkins and Adam Troutman primarily. Sometimes they'll go 12 and they'll switch it between Troutman and Kroll. Sometimes they'll go 13. Well, they'll use Adkins, Troutman, and Kroll. But the main thing that we see is that when Denver's in 12 personnel, it's, hey, they're really trying to set something up. And you certainly see that because teams have started to like, hey, the Broncos haven't had really impact or production from the tight end position. These guys are just going to be extra blockers, which for the last couple of weeks, that was true for the most part. Lucas Kroll had a nice catch in front of Shelby Harris late in that fourth quarter. It's a good play by him. But primarily, it's like Denver, I think, is strategic with how they're using the tight ends now. They're not a big part of their offense in terms of the passing game. But the opportunity is like, hey, we're going to reward you when the matchup kind of really merits that. And that could be something that comes up this week here against the Indianapolis Colts.
And maybe that's part of the way the running game shakes out too, because as we've seen the tight end position over the course of the year, the Broncos tried to make it work. They kept trying to force it. And I think they've realized in the coaching staff, they're like, we can't force it. It's not going to work. We just have to mix and match. And by the way, I always love on a little Tuesday tidbit for you when Cody brings up 12 personnel. Just a little reminder when you're talking to other football fans in case you didn't play or didn't know anything.
One running back.
It's
2 tight ends.
Right. It's not the number, it's digits. Yep. First is the running back. The second is the number of tight ends. So 11, 1 running back, 1 tight end, 3 wide receivers, 12, 2 tight ends.
What does Sean Payton call it? I think when Marvin's in the backfield, they call it like 0-1 or something like 0.
There's a couple terms, and then there's the Joker term that he used with Taysom Hill, and there's a couple little package things. But basically, that's what it equates to: is guys in the backfield as a running back, and then tight ends. Well, let's talk about those wide receivers and Marvin Mims in particular. Josh Reynolds. Last time we talked, we expected that Josh Reynolds would probably be activated, and perhaps even Levi Wallace, who had a bad game against the Browns, would be released and then brought back. Turns out they decided to just release Reynolds. Reynolds now moves on, and the Broncos obviously focus more on Marvin Mims and Troy Franklin. Well, Mims starting having some success now, 19 catches on the year, 267 yards, 2 touchdowns. That in and of itself, not that impressive this far into the season, but it's worth noting that 198 of those 267 receiving yards are in the last 3 games. As the Broncos are making a concerted effort to get Marvin Mims Jr. the ball. Now that you have Devon Vele stabilizing on the other side opposite Cortland Sutton, you have your 2 outside guys, and now you can use Mims in a lot of different fashions. We're starting to see some value in this, and it's not the idea that you're using his speed to throw bombs down the sideline. No. You're getting him into space and letting him create.
Yeah, and you got the opportunity to throw bombs down the field, which
I
would
it's always
say
a threat.
I would say the way that the defenses are playing Denver, specifically when they go with the personnel package that has Marvin and Troy Franklin in at the same time, defenses are worried about that. You see a lot of them check into some quarters coverage. Corners and safeties are going to be playing some cover 4 looks there just because they want to protect deep. And I would say the one thing, too, about Marvin and how he's continued to evolve is like the Broncos coaching staff last year. I understand like Cortland Sutton was the target getter there. They tried to force feed Jerry Jeudy a little bit, and they were trying to figure out, like, why can't we get Marvin going? Part of that was also QB fit, in Denver there. But so much of, like, Marvin's role, I think, has been patience. And I'll say this, like, for as frustrated as he's appeared to be sometimes, just because like this dude is ultra talented. You see it in the return game. He was a all pro as a returner as a rookie. The dude has the ability to just not only change games for you offensively, but on the special team side of the ball. And that has tremendous value for what Sean Payton and his coaching staff want to do. So for Marvin, not only now are we seeing him contribute out of the backfield as a potential running back or receiver out of the backfield where he gets matched up against an inside linebacker one-on-one. Well, now you're also seeing it's like, all right, now they're putting him in the slot and he's burning defenses the way that he did against the Cleveland Browns on Monday Night Football. His role is evolving, and I'd say patience has paid off for him, and it's been fun to see. Had a chance to kind of get a little close and just watch Marvin a little bit this year. He's got a level of confidence to him right now, and obviously he's someone that Bo Nix wants to feed the ball a little bit to, and that's going to be huge because we talk about the impact that Cortland Sutton and Bo Nix have with each other right now, specifically on third down. Teams are going to start, especially in these final 4 weeks. That's going to be the biggest key. Third down, where's number 14? That's how they're going to allocate their coverage resources, and that's where guys like Devon Vele, Troy Franklin, Marvin Mims, they're going to have to step up even bigger now, especially with them moving off from Josh Reynolds, which we talked to Sean Payton on Monday, and he said really it was a numbers game. He said, in terms of like the amount of guys we have healthy, you would have to make a roster move in order to bring Reynolds back onto it. He said, but primarily this was just based on how our younger receivers are playing right now. And you afford a guy, like Reynolds, a new opportunity to kind of get out of Denver after the whole event that had happened there. Right. Change of scenery might be good, but it was more so this move was made because Denver is liking what they're seeing from their young guys, particularly Devon Vele, Troy Franklin, which I've started to say this as well. Switch up a little bit of the roles here. Like get Troy Franklin the ball in space. Kind of what we did. We saw that RPO look on Monday Night Football where he found Bo Nix found Troy Franklin, and then he ran and got down to the 1 yard line. Do that, like start to get some of the short to intermediate stuff with Franklin, and then even take a couple shots downfield with Devon Vele because he's got that 6'5" size, and he's also got the ability to box out defenders. That's one thing they really love is his catch radius, his ability to catch passes in traffic. Differentiate your looks with these guys a little bit because I think you're going to need it in these final 4 games with the way the defenses I think are going to start playing Denver. You're going to see, I think, a corner playing outside leverage against Cortland. You're going to have a safety over the top, and then you're going to have a linebacker that's going to be kind of playing that spy essentially inside there. We call it a delta coverage because it's kind of like a triangle on how the defenses align. I break it down in some of the film reviews on Mile High Sports there. But I think that's what we're going to see a lot of here, specifically in third down, like third and medium, third and long situations. That's how I think defense is going to play Denver, and the young guys have to step up there.
And obviously, it's a great sign for the Broncos to see these wide receivers. Obviously, Vele and Franklin, rookies. Mims, a second-year guy, playing the big roles they're playing. And I think the points you make are really interesting when you're talking about how to utilize them. There's some micro-level stuff, and there's some macro-level stuff. Going back to the draft combine, right? Marvin Mims ran a 4.38. Obviously, that was extremely impressive, but Marvin Mims is 5'11". Troy Franklin is 6'3". He ran a 4.41. That's 0.03 of a second slower. So you're talking about a bigger body with basically the same functional game speed. And what you're seeing more and more, that's on the macro level. Both these guys can get downfield and beat coverage. We get that. But let's zoom out a little bit. Over the last 4 seasons, the average depth of target across the NFL has decreased. Even guys like Patrick Mahomes has gone down every single year to now anything beyond 7 yards on average is actually kind of a deep thrower. And the reason for that is exactly what you described. And I think you're talking about the idea when you're looking at using these bigger bodies, right? So the strategy with the shorter throws is get the ball to the Mims, the Franklins, if you're talking about the Chiefs, the Xavier Worthies. And you don't worry about trying to get it to them 40 yards downfield where the odds on them catching it is relatively low. Get it to them where your catch percentage is high, and then let them create. Where you're going to catch percentages that are low, the deep downfield routes, go to Cortland Sutton's and Devon Vele's, the big guys who can win those 50-50 balls, or at the very least, box guys out and perhaps even get a penalty there as well. So it's kind of inverted from the way people think about it, right? I don't know, it's people looking at fantasy sports over the years or thinking about the way football had been for a while, or maybe they're just playing Madden. I don't know. But nowadays you're seeing more and more of these really talented receivers with speed. They're on the short routes to get them in space and let them create, and going to the bigger guys downfield. So the idea that Marvin Mims was always going to set the team on fire here and get their offense going by being a deep shot down the sideline, that's not really how a lot of teams play these guys anymore. And to see the Broncos utilize it with Franklin and Mims and have it start to get some traction, it's one of the reasons I think you can be excited about the Broncos passing game. And one of the reasons they decided to move on from Reynolds, because 3 of their receivers who are in their first 2 seasons seem to understand their roles and they fit within this system. And more importantly, we know Troy Franklin does. They paired up at Oregon, but so does Nix.
Yeah, and look, it's just about being able to play to your strengths. And I think identify new strengths as you go along. And certainly I think that's where the Broncos offense has been from week 1 to now. It's every week they're learning something new about themselves. And I think the thing about Sean that I really like from what he and his coaching staff have done, it's very collaborative. You know, Sean's got ideas, but he also lets his coaches have ideas. There's things he agrees with sometimes. There's things he's like, nah, I'm not necessarily feeling that. But I would say that ultimately there's collaboration. And it's also even with Bo Nix, like, Bo even comes up like, hey, I think we could do this. And Sean listens and they look at it. And certainly we've seen a couple of plays like that. I'm not going to tell you which ones we've seen like that, but it's fun to see that the offense has become a little more innovative in a sense. And the crazy thing about it is so one-dimensional because of the lack of a consistent run game. That to me, I'm like, why? Denver's in a great position right now where they're at 8-5. I've said it. I felt like if they've had a better run game, they might already be at 10 wins this year. I think maybe you change the outcome of a couple of those early on games there. Once again, I just think that Denver's offense is in a position right now where they're continuing to get better. And I think this test coming out of the bye week, do we see them take a step forward, or do we say like, hey, did the bye week actually hurt them in a sense?
Yeah, it can blunt your momentum. I mean, that can be a thing that
I'm a big believer.
Obviously.
Like I've always been a big believer in not like having the 1 seed, like going into the playoffs. I'm like, it's kind of a trap a little bit. It's happened to the Broncos before, happened against the Ravens, and obviously 2012 when that whole situation happened there. Coming out of the bye week, like when teams usually play their best when they're continually rolling, you know? And I think that to me is the challenge. Is like players before the bye week were like, we don't want the bye week.
Right.
We don't at this point. We want to keep playing. So how does that mindset change? Like this is also another test on the level of maturity that this team has is can you come out of the bye focused and can you obviously with the challenge and the schedule that you have, what's it going to look like?
Well, there is a main reason you want the bye week. We'll talk about that in a moment. Some of it's just to get your head right. And obviously over here at Mile High Sports on Wednesdays, we have Wellness Wednesday. We look at mental health because mental health is health, and the way you treat it can change your perspective and the way you perform. And no one can help you with that more than our friend, Dr. Rick Perea over at think14u.org. That's think1, the number 4u.org. Performance psychologist for the Broncos during their Super Bowl 50 season, for the Rockies during their recent playoff seasons. That actually happened. I know it's hard to believe, but it did. And Dr. Rick was with them as well. But not only does he work with teams all over the league and NFL players and athletes all over the board, but he can work with you, whether you're an athlete, whether you're a parent of an athlete, or whether you work at whatever you do. We can all benefit from a bit of a reframe. We can benefit from taking a step back and realizing where we're tripping ourselves up at times, because all of us do. And that's what Dr. Rick and his team do over at Think14U. So check them out at think14u.org and check out Wellness Wednesdays with Dr. Rick Perea right here on Mile High Sports. An array of really interesting guests talking about not only mental health, but how it impacts sports. He played as well, brings on a lot of guests that did, and it's a pretty fascinating discussion. So make sure you check out Wellness Wednesdays with Dr. Rick Perea and follow everything he can do for you over at think14u.org. But the bye week obviously is not only an opportunity, Cody, to mentally refresh, but even more importantly for the body to refresh. And even though the Broncos didn't want to hit the bye, the defensive performance against the Bills meant that one player in particular needed that week off, and that's Riley Moss, suffering from a sprained MCL, missed the game against the Browns. The Broncos defense had not been beaten like it had been by the Browns and Jameis Winston and Jerry Jeudy all year long. How much of that, as we zoom out a little bit and we get that bye week, has been due to the fact that Riley Moss has been so good opposite of Pat Surtain that it really kind of held the Broncos defense together and gave the pass rush more opportunities to get to the quarterback?
I mean, it's tough. I think when you look at Riley versus Levi, two completely different styles of play. You know, Levi Wallace, I think, is better off in zone coverage, and I think he is a man-to-man coverage, whereas I think Riley Moss he excels in zone coverage, he excels in man coverage. He's also fast. And
Levi Wallace at his age at this point is not.
Yeah, no, you know, he's not the player he used to be.
I felt
like Levi was probably better suited off in the dime, playing in the slot in terms of some of the zone coverage looks there. You know, on the outside, you do get a lot of the speedier guys for the most part. And I just went back and I watched the game. It was a rough game for Levi. One of the worst feelings you can ever have as a defensive back is getting burnt like that. But for Denver, what can they do going forward? Especially because here's the thing, folks. We talked to a sports orthopedic surgeon yesterday on one of the shows I appeared on. And one of the things, we talk about as well, it's like, it's different when you're an offensive tackle and you have an MCL sprain. It's a little bit different because, usually these guys have knee braces on. They're moving laterally, which is an important function. But as a cornerback, not only are you having to move laterally, backwards, you have to plant, cut, change direction, and do it all backwards, essentially, while also running full speed. That's where you need your knee to be 100%. So the typical timeline for an MCL sprain is usually 4 weeks. For corner, it could be a little bit more. For Riley Moss, I would not personally expect him back this week. I would not expect him back for the Chargers game on Thursday Night Football. I think the point in which the Broncos are aiming for, or I think the realistic timeline might be that Bengals game, which, hey, Denver, if they can get a game, these next 2 games, they get one, or if they get both without Riley, that's huge. And then they get him back.
Even T. Higgins and Jamar Chase. You might want that.
Yeah, you're gonna want that back. But Denver's gonna have a plan. I don't know if Levi Wallace will get the start this week. Part of me thinks it's gonna be Chris Abrams-Drain, which I think it should be at this point, considering it's like when you have a guy who can't play man-to-man coverage at a consistent rate, like Riley Moss, a guy like Chris Abrams-Drain can do that for sure. Granted, he's a rookie. We know Vance Joseph doesn't always like playing rookies, but Vance, you've got no choice, my man. This is a point. Like, an organization drafts him. I understand you got to get over that fear of that. I think you have a great coaching staff in place, a great cornerback coach, a great defensive backs coach there, and Jim Leonard, who's going to be involved in the passing game. To me, play to your strengths, and that is a guy who can play man-to-man coverage. Because they didn't have Riley Moss, they felt like they couldn't move Pat around as much as they wanted to. Whereas in hindsight now, Sean Payton even told us on Monday, he said, after the game, we looked at ourselves and said, how would we do it differently? He said, more likely we would try to find a way to put our best player on their best player. And that's coming from Sean. And I understand as a D coordinator, you want to protect the rest of your guys.
Right.
But you can't allow it to cripple you in terms of what you're able to do in terms of neutralizing the best threat with your best player. And that is Pat Surtain, obviously a cover athlete here,
that's
Mile
right.
High Sports. He's on our poster board here. Fantastic stuff. Look at that work right there. Great stuff there by Doug Ottewill, Anilo Pirro, and company for that. But I think Chris Abrams-Drain is going to be the guy this week.
I do too, and I think that die was kind of cast when Wallace basically got yanked from the game and Abrams-Drain was placed in. He did make a mistake, had a penalty, obviously, but also didn't look completely overmatched. Are you a little surprised? Penalty, because I didn't either. Abrams-Drain, when coming out of the draft, by a lot of draft experts across the country, said that he was maybe one of the Broncos' steals of the draft in the mid-round because of his athletic ability, because of the style in which he plays. But it took him until the game against the Browns to even make his season debut. Does that give you any concern that it took that long to catch up?
No, it has nothing to do with him. It had more so to do with Denver's depth ahead of them. And look, if Tremont Smith wasn't on the team because of his special teams ability, Chris Abrams-Drain would be getting some playing time.
Some of this just there hasn't been room to be active.
When you think about it, Pat Surtain, Jaquan McMillan, you got Riley Moss right there, Tremont Smith getting obviously some activation there. You get and then Levi Wallace as your fifth guy. Like before everything had happened, it was hard for a rookie to crack that lineup. And then you had Damari Mathis come back. So it was nothing really against Chris Abrams-Drain, but it's like, all right, hey, like our depth is in a good spot right now. We got some veteran guys there. We got some special teams contributors. It's just not going to be his time right now. Not necessarily a red shirt, but now it's like, hey, you got the opportunity. And one thing I'll say about Chris Abrams-Drain, this goes back to the preseason. What I absolutely loved, not only from how he played at the cornerback position, it was more so also what he did on special teams. We talk about as a gunner. We talk about as a jammer in terms of punt return. He loves to get physical there, and he embraces it. And I think he's just got a great mindset, a great mentality. We obviously talked about it the Tuesday following the game. We got the clip there. He just, he said, you don't have time to be scared. He said, you can't be scared. You got to be out there and you got to get ready to play. And Abrams-Drain is prepared all season long as if he's going to get playing time, and certainly was ready when his number was called upon here. And certainly if he does play on Sunday against the Colts and starts, he's going to get tested a little bit, but they like his mentality. They like what he can do in terms of coming up against the run. They like his ability to play press coverage, off-ball coverage, zone, man. He can do all that. And I'm excited to see him maybe get some more run here. Fellow Mizzou grad, he's got to be able to get some more time. So
what do you think that cornerback rotation will look like then?
You mean like
the Colts?
Okay, so
I mean, if you're having Surtain on one side, Abrams Drain on the other. We know McMillan, of course, is in the slot.
That's primarily it. We'll see Damari in the dime.
Okay.
Damari's going to be there in the dime package.
Is Wallace active? Do you deactivate Smith? Like, what's the plan?
No, you don't deactivate Smith. He's your best special teams guy. I think it's Wallace that probably gets deactivated on Sunday. I think that would be the rotation.
How do you assign it? Because when you're talking about the Colts, and you brought it up, the receivers, Pierce, Downs, and Pittman, and of course Pittman maybe the most decorated of the bunch, but he's actually third on the team in receiving. That said, the Broncos have one receiver over 500 yards, and that's Cortland Sutton, of course. Mm-hmm. The Colts, despite the fact that they went away from Richardson, went to Flacco, that was a disaster, back to Richardson, they have three. Pierce, Downs, and Pittman all have over 500 yards receiving, all have 2 or more touchdowns. Only Sutton has more than 2 touchdowns on the Broncos. So they have had 3 productive wide receivers at multiple times this season, really all year long. So how do you assign these guys? If, for example, you're going to maybe put as Sean Payton said, our best player on their best player, who is that? Or do you maybe kick that another week? And that's a hint that you're going to be on Ladd McConkey and Jamar Chase and maybe DeAndre Hopkins as the rest of the season goes along. But in this game, maybe Surtain's not going to travel, but they've got to find a way to make up for all 3 of these guys. Yeah,
that's the question, right? Is Surtain going to travel, as much in this game? I think he'll move around in key situations on the best player, which I think for them will be Michael Pittman Jr., Pat against him, or it could be like Josh Downs. I think so much of it is like, all right, does Pat's size and his height and his speed, does it match up well with Downs better than does Pittman Jr. or whatever it may be?
And Pierce, by the way, is leading receiver and touchdown getter.
Pierce also had a couple of really nice catches against Denver in that Thursday night game in which fans exited early. And, that I remember watching him. He had a couple of really tough contested
big body
catches.
there, 6'3", 210-pound guy.
So for me, it's like, all right, like we don't know who's going to match up on who just yet. I just know that Denver's going to need Riley Moss back at some point. Like they're looking forward to it, but they're also excited to see Abrams drain a little bit. Really, and also another thing that kind of watched we haven't talked about, Brandon Jones. He left the game with a groin injury on Monday Night Football. I watched him try to continue to get it going. It just wasn't working for him there. So is he going to be ready to go this week? Is something we're going to be watching there at the safety position. I'm just curious to see how Denver adapts and adjusts here. This is going to be a tough challenge. Not only you have Richardson, you got Jonathan Taylor, you got those runners. 3 receivers. We'll see if Downs plays this week. I know he's been banged up, but it's not going to be easy. This is the tough Colts team.
It is essentially a playoff game for the Colts. If the Colts don't win this game, it becomes very, very difficult for them to make the playoffs. Not impossible, of course.
But they have 3 of the easiest games left on their schedule.
They do. But when they look at this game against Denver, to them, that's basically a must win. That they need this one because they need to get that. Not only get a game closer, but get the tiebreaker as well over Denver because they're trailing by 2 games. So for this one, this is basically make or break for the Colts. You'll get their best effort. Fortunately, it's in Denver. The point you make when you're talking about Brandon Jones is important too because we talk about it and we look at you like, oh yeah, Jonathan Taylor's on this team. That's a problem too. The Colts have kind of hovered around there at 6 and 7, and I think because of the quarterback drama between Richardson and Flacco, the idea is the Colts aren't a very good team. But the Colts actually look like a team that, quite frankly, if they stabilized the quarterback play, they could be pretty dangerous. And it's one of the reasons people thought, again, in a topsy-turvy AFC, this was kind of one of the dark horse teams that we thought would make a leap. It didn't really happen, but it's not too late for it to still happen. And if you thought the Browns were dangerous, wait till you see these guys.
Yeah, and I always felt like, too, them benching Richardson early on in the season, I felt like it was a bad decision.
Me too.
Poor decision. He's your young guy. He hadn't played in a lot. I think at that point when they benched him, he had only played in 10 games.
And the argument is he had kind of benched himself. But
because he pulled himself out, he's a young guy. But for them, it's like,
it was your fourth overall pick. That's your franchise guy.
Cost them kind of 2 games because all of a sudden now it's like, oh, Joe Flacco actually doesn't have it. What are we doing here?
Joe Flacco didn't have it years ago.
You go back to him and look, Anthony Richardson, he's had an impact, especially on the ground the last handful of weeks. It hasn't been necessarily in the passing game. They connect on some deep shots there, but rangy in terms of his accuracy in the short to intermediate stuff, the middle of the field stuff, but the downfield shots, he knows how to place the football in a good spot there in those situations there. So it's going to be huge for Denver this week to really kind of be on their P's and Q's. This is, in my opinion, this is going to be a tougher matchup than what they face with the Browns.
Yeah, and that one was a little close for comfort, obviously. And so when you look at the Flacco's performance, and I think that's a pretty good way to evaluate the Colts. And Flacco was the leading passer in four games, the primary quarterback in 4 games this year. They went 1-3 in those games. Mm-hmm. So what does that tell you about, you remove that? And if Richardson remains the quarterback at this point, now you're talking about a 5-4 team. Now, 5-4 team looks very different than a 6-7 team. And that's really what you're talking about with this Colts team. So they are dangerous. They are going to give the Broncos their very best shot. And the Broncos coming off the bye. I'm with you. I love more than anything in this game. What I love for the Broncos, who I don't think are a Super Bowl contender. I think they're ahead of pace on their rebuild. I think it's great. It would be great to make the playoffs. The point you made is the one that's interesting because I look at it and up in Boulder, the CU Buffs had a great year. They had an opportunity to control their own destiny and even get themselves into the college football playoff when they played Kansas. They did not take control of that. They did not play a good game. They ended up losing, and they ended up, of course, missing the Big 12 championship and then missing their shot at the playoffs. So they will play in a good bowl, an Alamo Bowl versus BYU, and what a lot of people thought might be the Big 12 championship. But they didn't take care of business, and so they got what they got. For the Broncos, what I love about this game, even though there are 4 games left, is this is a game in which you've had a break, you've had a bye, you're fresh, you've been able to game plan for an extra week against these guys, you're at home. Who are you? This is an opportunity not to show the rest of the league. Who cares what the rest of the league thinks? Who cares what the writers think? Who cares if the people who don't watch the Broncos who think they have a good running game think? Who cares? You have to prove to yourself. You got to look in the mirror and say, this is who we are. This is the kind of game we're going to go take on a team that is pursuing us. They're a team with a losing record. They're coming into our house, and we're going to take care of business. That's how you start building the confidence for a franchise going forward, especially with a relatively new coach and a rookie quarterback. This could not come as a better opportunity for the Broncos to make the kind of statement that we are back as a threat in the AFC than what we'll get a chance to see on Sunday.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, the stage is set. Show up for it. It's a big moment. I just know talking to a couple players throughout the week, they're excited for it. They're excited to get back to work. They were back in the building on Monday. They went through meetings. They had some lifts, and now it's like, hey, we're back in it. Let's go on a run here. Like that's the mindset. And look, it's as much as people want to ask a question like, are you excited with just having a winning season? Sean's like, our aspirations are a little bit higher than that, and certainly so. I'd be concerned if they weren't. So I think we're going to see. You're going to have to overcome the injury to Riley Moss, but I think we're going to see a very hungry Broncos team come out of the gate swinging here in the bye week. It sounds crazy. I legitimately can see them winning 4 games. It's going to be absolutely difficult when you factor in Indy and then a short turnaround on the road at the Chargers. That right there is tricky. The Bengals. I think Pat Surtain versus Jamar Chase is going to be fun to watch. That could be what defines the outcome.
One more loss for the Bengals changes their trajectory too. Obviously,
that game might get flexed if the Bengals keep winning and the Broncos win, and that game's coming up. That could be flexed into prime time. So keep an eye on that.
I could see that as well. Keep in mind the Broncos hold the 7th seed at 8-5. The Texans hold the 4 seed at 8-5. Now you can't get the 4 seed because you have to win a division, but the Ravens and the Chargers ahead. You get the Chargers on the schedule. The Ravens are a team that at 8-5, I suspect they're looking in the mirror and they're disappointed, but we have seen these losses. All of a sudden, when you are in a 4-way tie with 8 wins, just keep getting wins and letting this weird NFL season happen. You get a win. There's a chance that one of those teams ahead of you is going to lose to a team you expect them to or a team you don't expect them to. Look at the Bills this weekend losing to a Rams team that all of a sudden looks really dangerous. Again, you don't really know. So for the Broncos, just a tremendous opportunity. He's Cody Roark. Make sure you check out everything Cody's putting together over at Mile High Sports. So much great content every week. Host of the Locked On Broncos podcast. And of course, all the great film rooms, the ones from the Browns still up and fresh ones coming up, of course, after this Colts game. But a tremendous opportunity for the Broncos. And, we'll find out who they are. That's the beauty of it, right? It's the old Gary Kubiak. We're fixing to find out.
Buckle up. Get your seatbelts ready. It's going to be a fun one.
All right. Broncos country. This is a big game here. Playoff game for the Colts. Basically lose and basically call it a season. So the Broncos can control their own destiny. 3 of the last 4 games, beat the Colts. Any loss by Miami and 1 more win, the Broncos' odds on making the playoffs sit at about 75%. Not a lot of us had that going here, but that's what you get when the coaching staff and the quarterback all work together. We'll talk more about this, of course, as the week goes along. Make sure you follow Cody for all the latest. Danny Bailey's the man in the booth that makes everything work. Thanks to you, everyone who's watching the program. We appreciate it, whether you're watching it live or whether you're consuming it at the time you want to. We're happy to be there for you, and we'll be right back at it tomorrow. For Danny, Cody, and everybody at Mile High Sports, I'm Sean Drotar. Thank you. We'll catch you tomorrow right here on Mile High Sports Today.